"Sir, step aside for additional screening," the TSA agent said, eyeing the elderly man's military patches suspiciously. The old man complied without protest, even as passengers stared and whispered. But when Captain Sarah Mitchell walked through the terminal and saw who was being detained, she dropped her flight bag and did something that made every person in that airport terminal stand at attention. Welcome to Silent Heroes, where tales of quiet courage and hidden honor are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Terminal 4 at Los Angeles International Airport was bustling with the busy afternoon crowd. Passengers rushed toward gates, dragging suitcases and making last-minute checks for their flights. At the TSA security checkpoint, long lines had formed, security officers conducted routine inspections, and metal detectors occasionally beeped. TSA agent Kevin Morrison, working at the front of the security checkpoint, was on his 6th hour of the day, and his patience was wearing thin. At 31, with 2 years of experience on the job, Kevin was a meticulous man who tried to follow procedures to the letter. Especially with increased security concerns lately, he took any suspicious situations seriously. Around 2:30 p.m., an elderly man appeared at the end of the line. 82-year-old retired General Robert Bob Hayes wore a light blue Air Force uniform. His uniform was worn but well maintained, the ribbons and medals on his chest neatly arranged. He carried a small travel bag and an old leather wallet. He moved forward with slow but determined steps. Bob had proudly worn this uniform for 60 years. He joined the Air Force in 1962, flew 127 combat missions in Vietnam, and then served his country for 35 more years. He worked as a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base, later trained young pilots, and eventually rose to the rank of general. Today, he was flying to his grandson's wedding in San Diego. When Kevin saw Bob take his place in line, the first thing that caught his attention was the slowness his age showed. But looking closer, he focused on the uniform. The ribbons seemed odd to him, too shiny, too perfect. Nobody carries such perfect-looking old medals these days, he thought. When Bob reached the front, Kevin asked for his identification. "ID and boarding pass, please." Bob calmly handed over his military ID and flight ticket. "Of course, son." Kevin frowned as he examined the documents. The ID card read, "Retired General Robert Hayes, USAF." But to Kevin, this seemed too fantastic. "Is this ID real, sir?" "Of course it's real," Bob said patiently. "I've been in service for 58 years. Kevin looked more closely at the medals on the uniform. There were many: Air Medal, Distinguished Flying Cross, Legion of Merit, and many more. But Kevin had no military background and didn't know what these medals meant. To him, they looked too shiny and suspicious. "Sir, step aside for additional screening," Kevin said, doubt evident in his voice. Bob wasn't surprised. He had noticed the increasingly cautious approach toward elderly people at airports in recent years. "Of course, no problem." Kevin directed Bob to the special search area and called over his supervisor, TSA officer Lisa Chen. Lisa was an officer with 15 years of experience, but she wasn't an expert on military ribbons either. "Lisa, we need to check this gentleman's uniform and medals," Kevin said. "It looks a bit suspicious." Lisa approached Bob and politely asked, "Sir, may I ask where these medals came from?" Bob replied calmly, "These are my service medals from Vietnam, the Gulf War, and other operations." "Can you prove it?" Lisa asked. By this time, other passengers were starting to notice the situation. Some had stopped, curious about what the elderly man was doing. Others had started taking out their phones to take pictures. Bob pulled out a thick folder from his bag. It contained dozens of documents, photographs, and certificates. "Here are my service records," he said. Lisa quickly glanced through the documents. Everything appeared legal, but it seemed too complex to her. Kevin also came over and whispered, "These documents could be fake. Nobody this age carries this many medals." Meanwhile, Captain Sarah Mitchell was passing through the other end of Terminal 4. Sarah was one of United Airlines' most experienced pilots and had been flying for 25 years. Her father had once served in the Air Force, and Sarah had great respect for military traditions. Sarah noticed the commotion at the security checkpoint and approached. She saw an elderly man in uniform and the nervous state of the TSA officers. But when she saw that man's face, her heart stopped. That face, those ribbons, it couldn't be. Sarah quickly approached and looked at Bob more closely. She saw the ribbons on his uniform, the war medals, and most importantly, the pilot wings on his chest. Then her eyes focused on his name tag, Hayes, R. Sarah's breath caught. "General Hayes?" she said, her voice trembling. Bob turned to Sarah. From her uniform, he could tell she was a pilot. "Yes, I'm General Hayes." "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Are you real? Are you General Robert Hayes?" "Yes," Bob said, pleased with Sarah's recognition. Sarah suddenly turned and looked at the TSA officers. "What are you doing? Do you know who this man is?" Kevin and Lisa looked at Sarah in confusion. "Who is he?" Kevin asked. Sarah took a deep breath. "This man is General Robert Hayes, one of the Air Force's greatest heroes. He flew 127 combat missions in Vietnam. He worked as a test pilot with Chuck Yeager. My father served under his command." "Really?" Sarah's voice had grown stronger now. "This man is a living legend of American aviation history." By this time, the crowd had grown even larger. Other pilots, flight crew members, and airport personnel were starting to gather. Sarah's loud speaking was drawing attention to the situation. Sarah pulled out her cell phone and quickly made a call. "Captain Rodriguez, this is Sarah. You're at Terminal 4, right? Come to the security checkpoint immediately. General Hayes is here." After hanging up, she turned to Bob. "General, you've been treated very disrespectfully. This is unacceptable." Bob smiled. "It's okay, daughter. They're just doing their job." "No, this isn't doing their job," Sarah said determinedly. "This is disrespect." At that moment, Captain Miguel Rodriguez, United Airlines chief pilot, quickly approached upon Sarah's call. Miguel was also a former military pilot and knew General Hayes' reputation very well. "General Hayes," Miguel said as he approached. "This is truly an honor." Miguel turned to the TSA officers. "Do you know who this man is?" Kevin and Lisa were now really confused. "Can you tell us?" Miguel took a deep breath. "This man is one of the founding fathers of the modern American Air Force. He helped establish the Top Gun program. He conducted supersonic test flights at Edwards Air Force Base. He earned the Medal of Honor in Vietnam." The crowd had grown even larger now. Airport personnel, pilots, even passengers had gathered. Nobody had ever witnessed anything like this. At this point, Airport Security Director James Patterson had also heard about the situation and was hurrying over. Patterson, with 20 years of security experience, could understand the seriousness of the situation. "What's happening here?" Patterson asked, seeing the crowd. Sarah turned to Patterson. "Mr. Patterson, your team has detained General Robert Hayes as suspicious. Do you know who this man is?" Patterson frowned and looked at Bob. The elderly man's calm demeanor, neat uniform, and noble bearing impressed him. "General Hayes, is it really you?" Patterson pulled out his cell phone and quickly dialed a number. He was having General Hayes' information checked from the airport database. A few minutes later, the phone rang. Patterson's facial expression changed. Yes, I understand. Immediately." Patterson hung up and turned to his team. "Kevin, Lisa, come here immediately." The two TSA officers approached, now looking genuinely worried. "This man," Patterson said loudly, "is General Robert Hayes, retired, Vietnam War hero, holder of the Distinguished Flying Cross, Silver Star, and Purple Heart. 127 combat missions, 0 shot-down record. One of the most successful combat pilots in Air Force history." Everyone in the crowd fell silent. Kevin's face had turned bright red. Patterson continued, "This gentleman is one of our nation's greatest heroes, and you treated him as suspicious." "Sir, we didn't know," Kevin stammered. "You didn't know?" Patterson's voice hardened. Didn't you look at this man's uniform, his medals, his bearing? Lisa stepped forward. We're sorry, General. We really didn't know. Bob raised his hand. Young people, it's okay. You were just doing your job. Being cautious in these times is normal. But Sarah wasn't satisfied with this. No, General, this isn't normal. You weren't shown the respect you deserve. At that moment, a voice rose from the crowd. Salute him. Nobody heard who said it, but the idea spread. First, Miguel stepped forward, stood at attention, and gave General Hayes a military salute. Then Sarah did the same. Then Patterson. Then other veterans in the crowd. Within seconds, everyone in Terminal 4, pilots, flight crew, airport personnel, even passengers, had stood up and was showing respect to General Hayes. Bob's eyes filled with tears. He hadn't experienced such a moment in 40 years. Patterson opened his microphone and made an announcement throughout the terminal. Dear passengers and personnel, we have a very special guest in our terminal, General Robert Hayes, retired officer of the United States Air Force, Vietnam War hero. We respectfully salute him. The entire terminal filled with applause. People started taking out their phones to record videos, but this time with respect, with pride. Bob asked for the microphone. Patterson gave it to him without hesitation. Dear friends, Bob said, his voice strong and clear, thank you for this beautiful welcome. But remember, the real heroes are still on duty. The security personnel here, the pilots, the flight crews, you are all heroes. I'm just an old soldier. The applause intensified even more. Sarah stepped forward. General Hayes, is there anything we can do for you? Bob smiled. Actually, I'm going to my grandson's wedding, to San Diego. Which flight? Miguel asked. United 447, 4:30. Miguel smiled. I'm the captain of that flight, and I have a special invitation for you. What do you mean? Would you like to come to the cockpit, General? You could tell some of your stories to our young pilots. Bob's face lit up. That would be wonderful. Patterson also stepped forward. General, we'd like to offer you VIP service. Let us escort you directly to the gate. That's not necessary, Bob said. I'm just a regular passenger. No, sir, Patterson said determinedly. You're not a regular passenger. You're a legend. As applause continued throughout the terminal, General Hayes passed through TSA control. This time, Kevin and Lisa showed him the utmost respect. Kevin approached. General, I apologize to you. I made a mistake. Bob touched Kevin's shoulder. Son, you're protecting your country. Never apologize for doing that. But Kevin wanted to learn. General, your medals, are these from real wars? Bob nodded. Yes, but medals aren't important. What's important is why we fought. Why did you fight? Bob looked around, at the crowd, at the smiling faces, at the peaceful terminal. For this freedom, so people can travel safely, meet with their families. Kevin's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, General. As Bob walked toward the gate, everyone in the terminal continued to applaud him. Some passengers called their families to tell them about the situation. Some veterans approached him to thank him. When they reached Gate 23, Miguel invited Bob to the cockpit. General, meet my co-pilot David. He's also former Air Force. David Parker, a young pilot, jumped to his feet when he saw General Hayes. General Hayes, this is a real honor. We studied about you at the academy. Bob smiled. I hope it wasn't boring. Never. Could we talk about your contributions to the Top Gun program? For the next half hour, Bob told the young pilots about his experiences. Not war stories, but stories about discipline, courage, and teamwork. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Miguel made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special passenger with us today. General Robert Hayes, Vietnam War hero and legendary figure of American aviation. We respectfully salute him. The entire plane stood up and applauded. Bob stood up from his seat, smiled, and bowed slightly with his hand over his heart. During the flight, many passengers came to talk with Bob. Young mothers, veterans, teachers. Everyone showed him respect and listened to his stories. When they landed in San Diego, there was also a small welcoming ceremony there. The grandson's wedding organization had learned about the situation and made General Hayes' arrival special. When Bob hugged his grandson, he said, "Grandpa, what happened at the airport?" "There's a video on social media." Bob smiled. "I just met some good people, son." The next day, a new plaque was hung at LAX airport. "Respect is universal. Don't judge anyone by their appearance." Underneath was a photo of General Hayes walking through the terminal. From that day on, Kevin and Lisa began showing special respect to every elderly passenger. And they told every new TSA officer the story of General Hayes. Patterson also updated the policies. Every person in military uniform, regardless of age and appearance, will be welcomed with respect, and necessary checks will be conducted courteously.